Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for Descendants 3. And what Descendants 3 is essentially about is basically we center on the character of Mal. She at this point is very well situated. She's engaged to be married to Ben. She's going to become queen and things like that. But there are these, barriers that, they keep letting all this evil in. So she decides that she's just going to close the barriers once and for all. But also unbeknownst to her is Audrey, who has for some reason been let back into Aradon. And her, by, her seething jealousy of Mal, it makes her go evil. She ends up stealing the Maleficent Scepter as well as a couple other things that turn her evil and things like that. So now Mal, all the other descendants, they have to go back to the Isle of Lost and team up with their former enemies to hopefully take her down and save Auradon once and for all. So, Descendants 3 overall, as you can imagine, I was not excited for this film. I really have not liked these films very much at all. I found them mostly really dumb. I've always thought that they had potential, but they've never really delivered on their promise for sure. I've never really liked what they've been doing, but I will say, 2, while I did hate it, it wasn't to the level of 1. 1, I think is terrible. It's probably one of the worst Disney Channel movies I've seen. But 2, while I hated it, it was getting a little bit better, so I was at least hoping that 3 could be that conclusion, could maybe be the first, legitimately okay or even a solid installment. I was really hoping that this could maybe be something good, but I have to say, for a final installment of a series, this has to be one of the laziest entries I have seen in a very long time. Everything about this is such a piss-poor excuse for a final film, and we're just getting into right now, starting off with the cast. And honestly, I've heard a lot of people credit the actors here that, oh, they're still really into it, but I don't really hold that same sentiment. Most of the acting here isn't really that great. Dove Cameron especially, I just did not think was very good here. Look, the first film, I did not think she was really good. I thought that she was, kind of miscasted and really overacting. The second one, though, it seemed like she was more into the role. She was getting better. She was more used to it. Here, she just seems so over this role. Mal only has 2 modes in this movie. She's either overacting to the point where it just comes across as so fake and it doesn't work, or she's just completely bored and she's talking in this monotone voice and there's almost no emotion out of her whatsoever. And again, considering this is Dove Cameron, someone who really is the anchor of the person that's supposed to be anchoring this series, the fact that she's giving this little of a shit is really sad to see. I do really like Dove Cameron. I do think she's a very good actress, but she is much better than these films. And you can tell in this she's very much outgrown it. She wants to move on to other projects, and honestly, good for her, because she definitely does deserve better here. So, yeah, I really didn't think she was all that great. It's very kind of sad to say, because, this is her final performance in this role, but yeah, she really did seem over it here. She really didn't seem like she cared anymore. Now, thankfully, Sophia Carson, on the other hand, I did think was still really good here as Evie. She's always been the most consistent out of the 4 for me, and I do still think she's really good here. She doesn't have that much to do, but for what she has, she still does do a good job. Evie really is that one that is the most reasonable. She really is just trying to get everyone to come to an agreement so they can take down Auradon, go take down, Audrey and things like that, and I really did think that she did a really great job here. And again, even though she's really not in it that much, she still does do a good job, and her chemistry with Dove Cameron, it is still very much there. Again, aside from the fact that Cameron is clearly over this series, I do still think that she did a really good job, and I did still think their chemistry was pretty strong here for the most part. Now, yes, I will address the elephant in the room. This is, of course, Cameron Boyce's last performance, and it's very sad that he had to die on the untimely note that he did, but I have to say, for a film that is his final performance, he does do a really good job here. It is good to see him reprise this role one last time. Him and Booboo Stewart seem to be giving more energy than really most of the cast here. They actually seem to be the most in this. I'm not saying Sophia Carson wasn't, but these two seem like they were really into this final installment, and I can definitely give them that for sure. And the chemistry between these 4, it is still pretty strong. They do still work well together. You do see the camaraderie between them, and I think they did a good job with that overall. The rest of the cast, though, I sadly can't say the same for. Cheyenne Jackson is someone that I was very interested in when he was cast as Hades. He is an actor that I definitely really do like, but he just seems so miscasted here. He is trying to play this character that just isn't really Hades. I don't know what they were really going for, but this really wasn't Hades at all. I don't think he was terrible or anything, but I just don't really think he was given that chance to shine, and as a result, he just doesn't really stick out all that much, and especially compared to other of these, like, veteran theater actors that we've had, he really does not stick out very much at all here. Cheyenne McClain is fine. You know, she's definitely not, she was better in the last one for sure, but she's fine here overall, and I thought she did an okay job. Everyone else, though, no, everyone else is really bad here. Of course, you guys know I'm going to say it, Mitchell Hope as Ben is still terrible. Everything about this guy, he's so bland. He has one volume the entire time, and it's just this voice the entire time. He never really has any other emotion besides this, and that's kind of it. He doesn't really go through anything, you know, acting-wise in this movie. He hasn't really improved at all, and that's very sad to see. He still has absolutely no chemistry with Dove Cameron whatsoever. You don't really feel anything between those two, so he's still really bad, and I didn't think he was good at all. Thomas Doherty as Hook is really annoying here. I didn't think he was that bad in the second one, but he really annoyed me in this movie. They're clearly trying to make Harry Hook like, you know, they're trying to make him like Jack Sparrow or something like that, and it really doesn't work here at all. He just comes across as really annoying. Jadah Marie, I did not think was good here at all as the daughter of Dr. Facilier. She felt very shoehorned in, and just everything they give her to do is she's just not very good here at all. She feels like she was kind of added at the last minute, but easily, once again, and you guys know what I'm going to say, the worst part of this entire movie is Sara Jeffrey as Audrey. And look, you know I'm going to be biased because of how much I hate this character, but I have to say, she's even worse in this movie. And it's not just because of how much I hate the character, because Audrey herself, you know, even though I hated her, she seemed like she was going through sort of a transformation, but here it appears she's learned literally nothing at all. In the beginning of the movie, she's just like hyperventilating constantly, and you can see that she's just really pissed at Mal, but it's once she turns evil, that's when she gets really bad. There is not a single moment in this movie where she is even the least bit convincing as this evil, you know, presence where she's so powerful and, oh, she's gonna be the overruler of it all. It just feels so hokey, and Jeffrey just cannot do it at all. She cannot convey a sense of evil. She does not convey that menace that the movie needs. In fact, if anything, it comes across as rather laughable, and I thought she was truly awful here, and I was really hoping that she would have improved as an actress, but honestly, I thought she was even worse here than she was in the first movie, and again, that's probably why I didn't like this. That's probably why I didn't hate the second movie as much, because she wasn't in there, but wow, is she bad. She was pretty terrible here. I really hated her in this movie, and honestly, it reminded me how much I hated her. Like, I knew I hated her, but I kind of forgot, like, the big reason as to why. This movie reminded me why I hated this character so much, and it's not even the character. The actress is not elevating the material either, and it very much does show here. She just was not good at all here, and the same to say about a lot of the cast. A lot of this cast just did not really seem like they were as into this anymore, and that's very sad to say. What is a final installment, a lot of them just seemed kind of over it. And now let's get to the directing and the writing, which I'm just going to say right up front, this is easily the worst installment of the entire series. And I know that's not going to sound like much, because I gave the first one a D-, the second one's a D+, but trust me, this is easily the worst written one, and a lot of that does go to Kenny Ortega's directing here, which just seems so confused. For a final film that was promoted as like this epic conclusion and things like that, this feels so arbitrary. Nothing about this feels like this epic film that they're clearly trying to go for. I mean, the trailers made it seem like this was gonna be like the Disney Channel version of like Infinity War or something, but that's not at all what this comes off off as. This just comes off as really lazy, and it's really missing some kind of style here. It doesn't really have that set tone. There are points where, yes, it does go dark, but it doesn't go dark enough. There are points where it clearly wants to be fun, but it's not fun enough in that way. It just feels rather lazy and very slapped together, and it just really did not seem like Ortega's heart was very much in this one, and that's very surprising to me, because Kenny Ortega, despite how I feel about the other two films, there definitely was passion put into them. He clearly did care about these films, and this one I just didn't really feel like it was really there at all, and that's very surprising to say. So yeah, I really did not think the directing was very good here. The comedic moments, they just feel awkward. It's not even that they're not funny, they just feel really awkward here. They feel very weirdly placed in. There are moments where the movie should be taking itself seriously, and it's not, but then there are moments where the movie takes itself too seriously, and it just doesn't work at all. It's very jarring because there's no set tone. The moments that are serious, they don't work, and then the moments that are funny especially don't work. So yeah, the directing here is just really not good at all. The writing, though, is easily the biggest problem with this movie. This movie is a huge mess, and I really don't know what ended up happening. And again, this is coming from a non-fan. Remember, I don't like these movies, so the fact that I, a non-fan, am disappointed by this movie, that should tell you something. I mean, look, I wasn't expecting something good, but I was at least expecting that because this is the final installment, they would try to pull out all the stops here. They would try to make this something legitimately really epic and save the best for last, but nothing about this feels like a final installment, especially when it comes for the story that we're dealing with here. I mean, Audrey turning evil, nothing in the previous two films really seemed like we were headed in that direction. Yes, Audrey was a secondary antagonist who was a little bit jealous of Mal, but that was never really at the forefront of the first movie. That was just kind of like a subplot that really, it did take up a good portion of the movie, but it was something that we cut back to that always really annoyed me, and it seemed like after that, she was kind of over it. Like, even if you watch the first movie, she seems over it. It doesn't really seem like that's an issue anymore, so to have her back here just feels really forced, and it seems like the only reason they did that is because she wasn't in the second movie, and they felt bad, and they wanted to give her this story, and none of it really works at all, and as a villain, Audrey has to be the worst antagonist this series has ever had. I mean, her motivation just isn't very clear. Now, look, I can understand what they're trying to do with her. The idea is that Audrey is upset because, you know, she was supposed to be crowned queen. She was supposed to end up with Ben. So yeah, I can understand there's a little animosity there towards Mal. I totally get that. But there's no time to really convey that. There's never that moment where we see Audrey really how she feels about this. We get to see things from her point of view. We get a quick little musical number, and then all of a sudden she's just evil. And once she's evil especially, her plan, she doesn't really seem to have much of one. It's just she has all this power, so some people she turns to stone, some people she's just making them sleep, and it doesn't really feel like she has any other power. So when it comes to threats that they've faced, this feels like the least consequential because, again, Audrey just doesn't have a set plan. And if you contrast that with Uma, who, despite the fact that I didn't like that movie, I did think she was a legitimately decent villain who actually did have a good motivation, this just doesn't compare. I really did not feel like Audrey had a very good motivation at all. It was very hard to latch onto what she was really trying to do. And a lot of this movie, it's her in this one room. We cut back to her every so often when she tries to thwart their plan somehow, or she tries to get in the way of what they're doing, and it just never really feels like we have a set idea of what Audrey's really trying to accomplish here. So it just makes for a really confusing final installment in that way, and it just makes me question, like, why did they go in this direction? And I have to believe this was not the direction they were originally going to go in, because all of the trailers for this movie built up Hades as the main antagonist, and you thought, okay, Hades was going to be the main one here. He has almost nothing to do in this movie. It's revealed very early on that he is Mal's father, and you think, okay, maybe we're going to deal with that, but no, we never really get to deal with that at all. It's kind of just like something that's glossed over. Mal talks about how she doesn't want anything to do with him, and then suddenly she does. They really wasted him as a character, and I really, I get it. Like, I actually kind of appreciate the fact that, like, they were going for something different, and they weren't going to make Hades a villain, but there's not enough they do to justify why he isn't the main villain, because Audrey's so lackluster and so terrible as this main villain that you almost kind of wish that Hades was. And I was kind of like, I kind of wish Hades was in this movie more, because maybe he could have given us something that Audrey wasn't giving us. There would have been a sense of finality there, but there isn't anything, and it just doesn't work at all. But easily the thing that surprised me the most about this movie, and the thing that I think is going to disappoint most people, is the fact that this is the final installment in the Descendants franchise. And the Descendants overall, besides Mal, have nothing to do. Absolutely nothing. Mal sort of has an arc where you have her and she's now queen, and for some reason she wants to keep the barriers closed because Hades almost drained her power away and things like that. But other than that, she really doesn't have that much of an arc in this movie. It's just her kind of realizing that, like, this isn't the right course of action to take and things like that. Evie, Carlos, and Jay have almost nothing in this movie. They are completely pushed to the background, and that really surprised me, because again, this is the final movie. Those four are supposed to be our core characters, but it feels like they've completely forgotten that there are other characters in this movie besides Mal, because Mal is really the only character, besides Audrey, of course, that has anything of merit to do. I mean, the other three have almost nothing. All Evie gets is that we cut back to her every now and then. She talks about Doug and how, she's thinking about him and things like that, or how she's trying to get the two sides to come together, which, let me tell you, is so forced. The way they get the Isle of the Lost and Auradon together, it just feels really forced in that way. It doesn't really feel like they settle their differences. It's just like they don't like each other, and then all of a sudden they do, and it just doesn't really work at all. So she really has nothing to do. And then Carlos and Jay, all Jay gets is that he gets a few exchanges with Gil where they have kind of like a back and forth going on every so often, and then Carlos especially, though, has nothing. And for this being Cameron Boyce's final performance, and again, of course, they didn't know that this was going to be, like, the last thing he ever did, which, I mean, it's very sad to think about for sure. It gives him almost nothing. I mean, this is a really piss-poor final film when it comes to Carlos. He has the least amount of stuff to do, and you forget that they're in the movie. There were honestly points where I kept forgetting that these guys were in the movie. There's a conflict that occurs with Mal, and you think, okay, this is going to be, this is going to directly affect all these characters, and no, it really only affects Mal, Evie, and Uma, because those are clearly the only characters this movie cares about on that side. Things. Of course, they care about Audrey, but those are the only characters that they care about, and that really surprised me. I thought for sure that they would try to flesh these guys out a bit more, and look, at least in the first two films, they tried to give them something to do. Yes, Mal was always front and center, but Evie, Carlos, and Jay, they always had their own stuff going on. Now, most of the time, I didn't really like what they had going on, but they at least tried to give them something, and here, there is nothing that they give them, and that really surprised me, considering that this is the final film. You would think that they try to give them something meaningful, something, that would feel like something conclusive, something that would feel like, all right, that's a satisfying way to close out their arc, and there's nothing here, and that was very, very surprising to me. So again, the fact that I, a non-fan, am upset about this, I can't imagine how people that actually are fans of this series feel, because I thought it was a huge slap in the face to this franchise overall, and it really floored me that they gave this little attention to the other three members of the Descendants crew. I was very surprised by that. There's also tons of points in this movie where huge shifts will happen with characters, and then all of a sudden they're just gone, and it's so lazy in that way. Like, there is a spell that Audrey puts Mal under, and you think, okay, this is how she's going to be throughout a bunch of the movie. It's just dropped. It's never talked about again. Or something that happens to Ben, suddenly he undergoes his transformation. Again, dropped. Never talked about again. And again, at least in the other films, they stuck with what they did. They didn't just abandon things, whereas this film completely abandons almost everything that they do. In terms of what Audrey does then, they completely abandon it, and it just feels so lazily written, and I don't know how this film turned out so lazy. This is the final installment. You would think that they would try to do as much as they can to make this as satisfying of a conclusion, but they really don't here, and instead, we have scenes of Evie suggesting that these two sides should come together by playing a game, playing icebreakers, and coming together that way. I'm not kidding. That's literally a scene in this movie. There's a whole scene that's just devoted to these guys playing icebreakers and them trying to, you know, come together and things like that. Or we have a stupid scene with Dude the Dog. Yeah, that stuff is so funny. That stuff is so important, apparently. No, it's really not. It just feels so shoehorned in. And I've heard a lot of people say there's a good portions of this movie that was cut out, and that is surprising me because it feels like they left all of the filler stuff in, so I'm kind of curious as to, like, what they exactly cut out, because if they cut out what I think they cut out, then that makes this even dumber, because it seems like they've left in all the filler stuff that could have easily been cut out, and they took out the stuff that was genuinely important and would have given this a little bit more of finality, but they really didn't do that at all, and that very much surprised me. So yeah, the writing here, it's just a clusterfuck. It is an absolute mess. There's so much wrong with it, and I could go on and on, honestly. There's a lot of stuff that I hate about this movie. Also, there's very forced political commentary. What they're doing with the barriers, it is a very obvious Trump reference. That's clearly what they're trying to do. And I thought the zombies one was really dumb. No, that's nothing compared to this. And the message that they're doing anyway, it doesn't really work for this. Like, it doesn't really apply to what they're doing here at all. Like, at least with the zombies, I can kind of see what they're going for. Where here, it doesn't even really apply to the story. So yeah, it just feels so shoehorned in. The writing here is a mess, and yeah, so that's really all I got to say about that. I know I went on for a while, but trust me, there's a lot to talk about there. The cinematography is awful, but what do you expect? Of course it's awful. I literally said in the second film that these films could be better if they were theatrical, and I really thought that's where we were going to go with the third installment. You know, the second film, it was simulcast on all these different networks, they had really good ratings, and I thought that there was enough of a draw where they could transfer over to theaters, and this could just be like a High School Musical 3, where it's in theaters, and suddenly it looks a lot better, but no, they settled for the worst outcome possible, and because of that, we have a very cheap-looking film. And at this point, I mean, it looks even cheaper. There is not a single set, there is not a single shot that looks even slightly lived in. Nothing here looks like a real real place. Nothing looks like this is actually a place that you can go to. Everything just looks like a set. Everything looks cheap. Especially when they're with Hades. I mean, that whole, you know, the whole underworld and things like that, it looks like a set. It looks like they're just standing on a set and they're waiting to render it or whatever. It's so bad the way they did it. And again, I'm not necessarily surprised, but still, it just looks so cheap, and I couldn't believe that they didn't at least try to make it somewhat better, but no, if anything, they made it look even worse than it was, and it's just, it's really bad, guys. Cinematography here is awful. The score, let me talk about the score here. The score itself is fine, I guess, but the musical numbers here are maybe the most filler we've ever had. There's really not one song here that feels like it needs to be here. I mean, there's a couple here and there, but most of these feel like filler. There's one with Evie especially, and I was watching this with a bunch of friends. That's why it took me so long to finally review it. But I was like to them, guys, this feels like the Huma Huma of the Descendants movies. Remember Huma Huma, that song that was cut out of High School Musical 2? It was on the bonus features because Kenny Ortega realized that it was superfluous and it didn't need to be in the film. Here, it's like, nope, we'll just keep them all in. You know, we'll keep all the songs in. And it felt like the only reason they kept that in is so Evie had just something to do. And that's all they really do. They give her this one song, and it doesn't feel like it even needs to be there. It just feels really filler in that sense. And there's a lot of songs that are like that. There is one song here I did really like, and it's called My Once Upon a Time. It's the song that Mal sings, but even that song doesn't really fit in the context of the movie. It's a good song on its own, but it feels way too upbeat and way too uplifting to what's actually going on, which is pretty dark in that way. So again, these songs, they don't fit organically, and at least in the other films, they have. I haven't liked most of them, but they fit in organically, whereas here, they feel very out of place. They don't really feel like they fit in with the grand scheme of things, and that was very surprising for sure. All the other songs, they either felt like they could be cut out, or they just were straight up bad. There's one with Nights, especially. Whoa, that is a franchise low. Look, there's been a lot of really cringy things in this franchise. Night Falls is probably at the top of the list, for sure. It's definitely at the top of the list. I don't know if it is the top of the list, but it's up there for sure, because I was pretty flabbergasted by what I was watching there. That was pretty bad. But yeah, the musical numbers, I mean, they're as disposable as they've always been, but they've never felt this disposable, to the point where a lot of them feel like they could be cut out, almost. So yeah, that didn't really work. And then the editing, like I said, this film is so choppily edited, especially when we cut back to Audrey. Anytime we cut back to her, it feels like she's in a different movie. I joked with my friends that it seemed like she came on as a last-minute addition, and they're like, okay, we know you're busy with all these different projects, so we'll just film you in the same location so you won't really have to do anything. And, you know, you will just have to be in the same location, you'll just have to scream, and that's all it is. It's like we cut back to her, she does something evil, it doesn't work out, she screams, and then we move on. And it's really badly edited in that way, and there's a lot of scenes that are just unclear. You know, from the beginning of the movie, we established that they are all assigned this future VK that, you know, they're gonna let into Aradon and things like that, and they kind of, like, take them under their wing. But that just kind of gets thrown out the window. We really only focus on Cecilia because, oh, all the others are under the sleeping spell. But it's like, we never saw that happen. Like, they act like we saw this happen, but we didn't. And, it's so badly put together. I don't know who edited this movie, but it's so choppy. It doesn't even feel like a first draft. It feels like this was just, you know, it feels like they were editing the movie and then they lost half the footage and they still kept it in the film. It's so badly put together in that way. And yeah, the editing here is really bad. And the way this movie ends as well is so puzzling to me. Like I said, the message itself is not a bad one, but the way it's handled here, it's not really a happy ending in that way. Like, I was really thinking about this. It's not really a good thing what ends up happening. Like, in theory, yes, but when you really start to think about it, and you really think about what this franchise is all about, yeah, this isn't really a good thing what ends up happening here. And also, the way Audrey is defeated is so lazy to the point where I was shocked that that was it. Like, at least in the other two films, they've embraced the cheesiness. They've embraced the fact that, yeah, this is really dumb, but we're going all out here. They don't even try. There's a small scrimmage. It's not even a scrimmage. It's like a small fight here and there, and then that's it. There's like nothing else that plays a role in her defeat. It just feels so lazily put together. Guys, Descendants 3 is awful. I mean, what were you expecting? It's a terrible movie, but it's a lot more lazier than I really was expecting. For a final film, there's barely anything given to these characters. Mal even doesn't really have that much of an arc going on. Dove Cameron herself feels really bored here. So I will say Sophia Carson, Cameron Boyce, and Booboo Stewart, they still seem like they're into it overall, but everyone else seems like they're pretty much over this series. Cheyenne Jackson is very much wasted here. Sara Jeffrey is easily, Audrey is the worst villain we have ever seen in this franchise without a doubt. The effects look terrible. It's very lazily edited. It's very lazily written. It's just the definition of how not to do a final film. And again, considering the fan base that this series has, I'm honestly surprised that this is what they ended up going with as the final product. I really feel like they could have taken their time with this more, and they could have put out something legitimately great, but no, they settled for something really dumb, and they settled for something really lazy and something that just doesn't at all feel like the direction that they were going, and as a result, we get a film that just isn't satisfying. And again, this is to a non-fan of the series, and the fact that I can't say I'm satisfied, again, should tell you just how lazily put together this film is. I imagine that people who are fans of the series, they probably hate this even more than I do, just because of how just of a non-conclusion it really is. I mean, there's so much they could have done. And again, I mean, I was expecting a bad movie, but they could have done so many things to make this from feeling as lazy as it did, and they just didn't. And instead what we get is a far more lazier film, and one that just really showed me just how bad of a franchise this really is, how little of a shit they really do give anymore, and how they really just wanted to end it all together, and that's very sad to see. As much as I don't care for these movies, I will respect a movie more when they try to do something satisfying and they try to cater to the fans and, you know, give them what they want, than a film that just does absolutely nothing to feel like a final film, and a film that just feels like it's chugging along in that way. And that's exactly the kind of film we're dealing with here. And as a result, we have what's easily the worst installment of the entire franchise. And so for all the reasons I just mentioned, I am absolutely going to give Descendants 3 overall a D-. And with that, guys, that's it. Yeah, so Descendants franchise, it's now over. I honestly can't believe it's over. I feel like it was just yesterday when I was reviewing the first movie to you guys, and, you know, all you guys really love that review. You wanted me to review Descendants 2. I did, and, of course, I had to review Descendants 3 because of that. But either way, guys, let me know what you guys think of this very interesting franchise for sure. What did you think of this final film? Did you like it? Did you not like it? We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.